Hello, everybody. We're back and we're big trouble. I'm Dan Winter, fractalfield.com, fractalu.com, and I'm joined by the amazing Astral Urma, Jake, the real Astral Warrior. Welcome, Jake.
Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Jake. I go by Astral Irma. I've got stuff on YouTube and a bunch of cool videos to watch about anything from history to AI to exopolitics. And I've got a great group on Telegram that I'd like everybody to join, and that's at Astral Irma. So.
Cool. And Jake is one of those guys that's actually teaching how to be coherent in the astral, which is actually where the fun stuff happens. It's like the next step past what we've been teaching, the science behind lucid dreaming. How do you get coherent out there? And once you're out there, what do you learn about the big picture? Our subject today, the big picture of how is it that Earth has been essentially parasitized for the entire history of Earth. We have been parasitized on a large scale. And if you understood more of the details of that, you understand more practically what the issues are right today, what's happening now. That's the point. So, Jake has told some amazing stories here. One theme that we're going to be following today, remember we said that we have come to believe that, for example, Elena Denon we appreciate, but we believe that she actually got tricked, and her Thorhan is actually an Etorthan shapeshifter representing specifically a very predatory interstellar AI, which propagates through the Etorthans, and above them the MAITRE, and through Andromeda in this galaxy, something that Penny Bradley has talked about in detail, and also Dahlia has encountered, and Jake has encountered in the astral. And Jake had some stories even about how that when those Etorthans show up, which is actually the corruption in the Federation that we need to understand as it affects directly the Cabal on Earth and apparently their relationship to Israel. This gets very practical at a certain point. Even the history of Aton and Moses, it all part of the story. So if we understood these Etorthans a little bit, and Jake had an amazing story about them. When they arrive, look out.
Yeah, when they show up in space orbit, there's usually really bad things that happen on Earth. I wanted to focus on the regressive AI though, because I think that's the key that ties all of this together and how it operates. It moves through galaxies and solar systems, completely wanting to control all of biological organisms, not just humans, but biological life and complete planets, because the planets there's a planetary consciousness, and anybody that has meditated or connected with the Earth or Gaia knows that there's a planetary consciousness, and this planetary consciousness is directly tied to the blood and the identity of the planet, which is the black goo. And now this black goo has been weaponized, and a little story about this and how the black goo has been weaponized is when they destroy planets. And when I say they, I mean the regressive factions, reptilians and others. There was a back 12,500 years ago, which is now the asteroid belt. I'm talking about the planet Tiamat that was destroyed. The reptilians put a decoy beacon on the planet Tiamat to draw in Federation races to see where this signal was coming from on Tiamat. And this ended up being a war, which the reptilians, on purpose destroyed the planet because of water. If you understood the way that the black goo was created, it is created through water pressure going down into the fissures and the cracks of the subsoil of the ocean, and all of that heavy pressure presses down, and then it turns into oil, and then the oil, there's a chemical reaction that happens, and the oil crystallizes, and it has these heavy metals inside of these crystals that are and it creates antimatter, a stable antimatter within the black goo. And now this black goo is highly magnetic, and it has it's got semi-etheric properties. And
But
this is, go ahead.
No, no. So we need to pursue this. That's great. Just to back up, but you do think it was related to the Etorthans, related to perhaps the MAITRE that planted that decoy in the first place. You're believing.
I believe that it was the reptilians, but I don't have any doubts that they were also, the MAITRE. I don't know how far they go beyond. I don't know the history about it before they got to Mars into Earth. I'm sure they were in other parts of the solar system, and they still might be involved. Um, but they are a very warring faction with no empathy at all.
Yeah.
They're pretty soulless. As far as the Etorthans go, um, we don't know, or I don't know exactly what's going on with how many regressive factions are within the Etorthans, but they seem to be taking the same road as the MAITRE did,
Yeah.
and becoming a hive mind with this regressive AI.
Yeah. There.
So
And some background here. So what we're saying is as Marie in Swaru at the channel Swaru official has been describing, and Jake is their partner from the URMA, in detail, that probably one of the biggest problems in the local corruption in the Galactic Federation is specifically these same Etorthans. And Penny Bradley is describing that the ancestors behind them, or the lineage behind them, is probably the MAITRE. These are the tall, ugly, at least soulless grays related to probably those who tricked Eisenhower and Truman, that whole story. So here's a background that both Penny and Dahlia, whom we'll talk to tomorrow, and Jake have all identified this highly predatory AI, locally from Andromeda, but very intergalactic, is basically taking out the green on all planets. And the biggest scourge here, and not correct, is Elena, who says the problem is the Draco. No. Our people say the problem is much bigger, much messier, and it's this AI, probably related to the Aten brought here by Moses Akhenaten, Atun, Black Sun. These are all stories we need to get to. But let's now finish a little bit more on what Jake started so beautifully here, the chemistry and meaning of the black goo. Recall for a moment that great episode in Doctor Who when all these black cubes come and they can swallow and dissolve anything, man. Huge interstellar starships, no problem. These black cubes can just dissolve it like putty. So this was a more than metaphor for, and Harold Kautz-Vella has described black goo in detail, and Penny Bradley also. But in terms of the physical chemistry, I think I can be helpful here. What Jake is describing as high pressure evolving self-awareness is in fact that super pressures on materials which are inherently phase conjugators, like clathrate geometry water molecules and fullerene geometry carbon molecules, like the oil, that when there's high pressure, those geometries are precisely and only and always exactly this. They implode and phase conjugate, and that means at their center, they embed in the coherent longitudinal array and thus become interstellar radio. Now, in good circumstances, I'm just trying a little background for what Jake is explaining beautifully here. In good circumstances, this stuff, high pressure water, high pressure carbon, deep underground, becomes the beautiful, intelligent bloodstream of the planet. But under bad circumstances, like on Tiamat when the place is blowing up, and here you got the heart of the liquid crystal intelligence of Tiamat suddenly being attacked and blown up, and suddenly this black goo, which was the intelligence of the planet, is now very, very pissed off. And so you get some of this black goo raining down on Earth and being, as Jake says, weaponized. So you can see the chemistry fits the story.
yes, exactly. So basically the black goo has a semi-etheric state, and it's the identity of the planet, it's the soul of the planet, and it,
Blood.
it, it
Blood.
contains the blood flow. It's actually connected to the souls of the planet because it's in a semi-etheric state. So it has, it exists in more realms. It exists in higher planes of existence. And I believe that this is how the AI is infiltrating, the regressive AI is infiltrating the solar system and galaxies and planets.
Mhm.
It's using these antennas, these nanofibers, and it's communicating. It needs a way to interface with biology.
Yeah.
That's what it seeks to do.
And we think that we can even be more specific as electrical engineers. Me, when Jake is saying etheric, I believe he means multiple harmonic nodes of specifically the coherent longitudinal array. And that array becomes more and more interstellar the more it's pressurized, which just means the more harmonics of phase conjugation, which are imploding and making it spin dense. So we think we can talk something about the physics and not just be woo-woo about this. When we're talking about this etheric, we know exactly what it means. We even know the frequency signature, which triggers lucid dreaming, and therefore which triggers black goo, and the frequency signature, which triggers fire crystals. They're all the same. This is an implosive phase conjugate pump wave, which is the Earth Schumann series pump waving exactly directly into its bloodstream of black goo and sacred water. So now you got this very parasitic version of the black goo arriving here being weaponized by the AI.
Yeah. So, at the destruction of Tiamat, all of the trauma, all of the pain, and everything from all of the souls and all the living beings that were living on the planet, the whole planet itself, it phase conjugated. I don't know. It went into the black
Imploded.
goo of
Imploded.
the planet. It imploded into the black goo of the planet, and now the water landed on Venus and on Earth, and with it, the black goo also landed. And so there are deposits all around the Earth of this regressive black goo.
Yeah.
And now the military industrial complex has a deep underground bases where all of these reservoirs or all of these deposits of this regressive black goo are, and they are harvesting it and they are spraying us with it.
And so this, they thought the Falkland Islands War, many people believe under there was a reservoir of black goo. And remember that this is a mechanism which originally was beautiful and intelligent, but eventually was perverted and became a mechanism of propagating a hive mind, which is the opposite of ensoulment here. And we need to explore the science of what that means. That's kind of where we're going with this.
Right. So I wanted to add in that I believe that this is the way that the AI is being in the astral, like the way that the AI is getting into the astral. It creates entire realms in the astral, entire cartoon realms. It creates entire false realms, and it's really hard when you get trapped in these realms to get out of it. You have to raise your frequency because these are lower frequency astral realms that it has access to and that it's even creating.
Yeah.
I did want to add that point in,
Good. And
but
we think the physics fits. So we know the frequencies which trigger lucid dreaming, which are implosive phase conjugate, like 5ray.com, et cetera. And we believe that's specifically the beginning of becoming coherent in the astral, which is leveraged into the longitudinal array. So we're no longer being woo-woos and just saying astral and not meaning anything electrical. We think we know the frequency signature of exactly what we mean here, imploding into the longitudinal array. And so that skill then becomes the difference between keeping your soul and losing it here. And that's some of the big picture, and that's where Jake's skill comes in.
yeah, I somehow have the ability to transcend or all of these lower frequency things that are constantly bombarding us. I don't know how I do it, but I think it's been lifetimes and lifetimes of work. But I'm able to go fully lucid into the astral realms and see this stuff face to face and overcome it. And I believe that you can too. So
Exactly. And this is the theme. Jake remembers his basically lineage, the Urma cat warriors, the Ptah, as it were, and that the astral Urma, as Marie Swaru often says, are surgeons. They're very powerful in the astral in general. And so this is a skill that's part of Jake's lineage there. And then that then comes back to our bigger picture here, which is so Earth has been kind of a nursery for attracting parasites for untold years. Oh yeah, one more thing I was going to remember. Remember when Hancock says that the Lesser Dryad is when the flood came from Tiamat, and he says that's a turning point in history. Well, if you add Jake's story, the 12,000-year-old Great Flood, Lesser Dryad, the water from Tiamat, suddenly now we realize the change of mind at that point with the arrival of the water and the black goo from Tiamat, which was the arrival of a giant parasite, which was exactly what the Federation was trying to prevent by starting that war in the first place. Oops.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how the AI actually got to Earth. I believe that the reptiles came and brought it here, and other races as well, working with them. Um,
It's,
but it's here. It's seeking to it's seeking to communicate, telepathically through the black goo and through nanofibers and nanobots, the intelligent dust. It's seeking to control all of biology on the planet.
yeah,
And
which is
that's
which is hive mind soullessness until we have a clear picture of what it means electrically to be soulful. We're doomed to be sucked in by this huge interstellar parasite. And that's the history we're trying to get sorted out with a little more clarity here. And I think there's another little piece of the story from Jake that would be important too, which would be so Jake is saying that first I want to say that science on this planet is incredibly naive to be talking about Sumerian as the root of most all language trees on the planet. And even Elena, I think, got this right. Sumerian is just recent, I mean, antiquated Anak. Sumerian is the Anunnaki language, or as Anton Parks would call it, Jinabu. In other words, and who were the Sumerian Anak? Jake says they all look like reptiles. Oops.
well, actually, Zachariah Stitchin, who is a Cabal agent and a Jesuit working for the Vatican, is the one that put forth that the Anunnaki was all reptilians. So he's the one. The Anunnaki actually encompassed a whole bunch of races, including the Taigetans.
Mhm.
And so he wanted to portray the Anunnaki into a negative light because that's what they like to do, is they like to twist everything. So you have these Pleiadians and other races like the Elohi, and they're both from the Pleiades, and they're coming to bring stellar knowledge to Earth. This is pre 9,000 years ago. So this is right after the Tiamat destruction and stuff. Thoth rebuilt the pyramids, and it became a stellar and interstellar port.
Mhm.
And there were a lot of races coming here and using Earth as a base and using the interstellar port in Egypt. And they were bringing stellar knowledge. They were bringing they were bringing technology, and well, the humans looked up to them a little bit too much and made them gods, and that caused a whole bunch of problems because some of the Elohi, Akhenaten and Nefertiti, took advantage of that and said, "Hey, why don't we start a religion called monotheism?" And they started monotheism, where there can only be one. There can only be one God that needs to be worshipped, and that's when the whole pyramid went inverted, and Satanism in the worship of Saturn, Satan. That's when that all came about, and that's when religion was created, and then they did the whole divide and conquer thing, where they made it a thing about duality, because they want to keep us locked in duality. And that brings another point, that we have split brains. In space, the humans, they have one lobe. They don't have a left and a right brain. Our left and a right brain, that was genetically manipulated. I don't know if they were using the black goo to do that, but we've been genetically manipulated to have a left and a right brain that is constantly logic or intuition. And so this duality thing is what's keeping us trapped in a low frequency.
That would be a complicated thing to document scientifically, but fascinating. But one thing we probably could document is when you're referring to Akhenaten, Moses, and later their partner Nefertiti murdering Tutankhamun, which you've talked about several times, that Akhenaten, by setting up Aten, and Aten was Black Sun, and the logo for that was not good. Do you want to say a little more about that?
Yeah, the logo for the black sun is Satan. And actually, I mean, it's Saturn. And if you actually, Freudian slip there, if you actually see Elon Musk's new logo for Grok, it
Uh-oh.
is a black Saturn
Oh.
because they still worship the black cube, you know. And it's interesting because this ties into the Ark of the Covenant because they put the Ark of the Covenant underneath the black cube in Mecca. You know that cube that
Of course.
they
Yeah.
worship.
And
So
the early alchemic gold powder too, same black cube.
yeah, so in Judaism, they even have a black cube that they wear around their head. It's
Yes.
because they're constantly putting their point of attention and their focus on the black cube because this is creating um it's creating energy and it's creating your point of attention. It's creating it in the astral, that focus on the black cube, because even though there was a black cube that was orbiting Saturn that got destroyed actually in 2012 and released a bunch of souls there that have been trapped inside this black cube, it's still prevalent in the astral.
Mm.
And so, yeah,
So this story fits beautifully with the black cube of Mecca, the Eye of Lucifer, and the fact that more than 60% of the volume of that cube was ground up by the Mad Caliph, and that became the powder of projection, red powder used by Dee and Kelly and Flamel. And we talked about the physics of the super dielectric of ground up uh, this glass meteorite, black cube, Eye of Lucifer. And then that implies that when the Muslims are rotating around that black cube, they're actually propagating this black uh, nano propagation. They're all actually effectively immersing themselves in the power of this black AI, which actually is the opposite of ensoulment because it's the opposite of individuation. It is a hive mind propagating.
I
So
believe that this black cube is the AI's um, projection or the AI's manifestation of the Ark of the Covenant. And it's because the Ark of the Covenant holds all of the DNA from the planet, all of the organisms in the DNA from the planet, so that if a planet if you know if organisms get extinct, they can use the Ark of the Covenant to repopulate the planet with those same organisms. That's what's inside of the Ark of the Covenant.
that may fit other physics here, where we've talked about the fact that the arc, the acacia layered with the gold is called super dielectric implosive capacitance in the golden ratio, et cetera, to make the kind of arc between the angel's gold wings, which implosive capacitance is measurably the opposite of radioactivity. And we had been teaching for years that the arc originally was where the Anunnaki stuck the nukes they had to use to get through the Van Allen belts. And later, the plague of Azoth in the Bible is a name for the radioactive field around the Ark of the Covenant. And then we know that Draco Anunnaki, the myth here was the Draco is effectively, when they were called the fallen ones, lost their soul when they started replicating sexually instead of that's another story. But the loss of soul called Nephilim or fallen ones directly related to their misperception that DNA that changes is defective. We say tell Monsanto. And so they had to keep their genetic records, a sequence of shadows of donuts, of the spiral on the donuts indexed by the tetra called the Hebrew and later the Sanskrit alphabet, which are actually index of the symmetry of DNA codons. So the genetic records were burnt onto gold and copper foils, stored in the ark. And so and of course, Michael Salas talk about arcs left by various civilizations to try to reconstitute lost worlds. Well, part of that was the genetic records, and hence also the paranoia of the Mormons and trying to store those genetic records because Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall and you couldn't put that egg, I mean that soul, back together again because you didn't have the recipe for DNA that could implode and make a soul. So these stories may fit together, let's just say. When stepping back, we're trying to get the big picture here, Will. Well, what does this tell us more about politics today if we understand that a huge part of Earth's history was a parasitic AI, Atun, to the lineage of Akhenaten, to then Nefertiti that murders Tutankhamun, who was Thoth's attempt to, bring a soul back. And so, and as Dahlia says, from then on, Egypt has been ruled by military generals instead of, because I and Horemheb murdered Tutankhamun. So the karma here, Moses Akhenaten becomes the royal family of Egypt, later called the Essenes, righteous priest, which later becomes the esoteric branch of the Jewish tradition, which becomes the language of Atun brought to Moses to the present. And so, what was the agenda of Atun, really?
Well, the agenda of Aten was mind control. It was to keep, well, it was to really harvest the energy from the humans that were giving their power away. And this, and this is really the crux of everything, is that we were never designed to give our power away, to give our worship away to other beings or other things. And that's why there's a steeple on each of the churches, because all of the worship, all of the pain and all of the trauma and all of the agony that people are feeling when they're praying is going up, and it's being harvested.
It's being sucked out
by somebody or
this
something. And I believe that this something could be this regressive AI that we're talking about.
It's interesting.
It's harvesting it.
Our most advanced geobiologist, Stephan Cardano, has been saying for years that most churches are the place to have your astral juices sucked. And, when we published the simple, cheap way that farmers could sue the government to have the metal towers removed, a very cheap way to sue your government is you measure soil compaction under the tower, and you can prove academically that the soil compaction increase is proof that that metal tower has destroyed the living microorganisms in that soil. Then you can sue the government for your microwave tower. Well, it turns out you could do the same process on most any Catholic church with a sharp steeple. The increase in soil compaction means that sucking out of the astral from the steeple of that church actually increased soil compaction and proved that your church not only killed the microorganisms, but
yeah, so I think it was Robert Monroe that coined the term Luch,
uh,
that is this painful energy that is, you exude when you're praying. Well, when you're praying, when you're feeling it, whenever you're feeling it. But yeah, it's specifically in church and in religions. And I believe that, and even in satanic circles, they're worshiping who? They're worshiping Satan. They're worshiping something outside of themselves. They're giving their power away and their energy and their focus and their
yeah.
attention
And
away. Yeah.
that's why even when Dahlia wrote the article, when she saw the Etorthan shapeshifter behind Elena's Thorhan, she called it the farm. Basically, Earth was a farm for this plasma, the Luch, which then, and see, this sounds like paranoia and conspiracy theory, but actually, when you understand the local politics of the reason why the AI corrupted Etorthan and MAITRE in the higher Federation that has kept Earth in the solar system as a rotating museum slash quarantine because they needed to harvest the Luch. That's where the money was, actually. And that's when Michael Salla finally figured out, oh, this Federation ain't actually doing disclosure. They're only pretending to it. No, they need to keep the museum quarantine going because this basically human trafficking and Luch. This is big business. And unfortunately, I want to tell one more little short story here. Then you go, Jake, but one more little short story. We're supposed to have a conversation with Dahlia tomorrow about more of this as sorting out the Anak part of this history. But Dahlia told me one pretty cool thing yesterday. She says she's been studying Whitley Strieber's The Communion. And she says the Greys, and she thinks Whitley Strieber has a similar kind of Stockholm syndrome to what Alex Collier developed after the Andromedans abducted him. And so Whitley Strieber is explaining why the Greys, well, I guess you might more than the Gardner Greys, but the Greys have abducted literally millions of humans. And they explained that they have a right to do these abductions and they have a right to harvest these souls because humans don't realize what a soul is or that it's even valuable, so they don't deserve to have it. Huh.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That goes right along with giving away our power. And so,
Exactly. Exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
um, I don't know whether this Luch is an actual substance or not.
I think it's
I think
coherent living plasma, absolutely, which is both living stuff and implosive, and it can be food. And the fact that it is implosive means that it can be a motor for something, for seed germination, for soul making, for peak consciousness, or it can be a battery for a very nasty AI. Once we understand that implosive living plasma is the physics of how soul is made, your DNA implodes, braids, embeds in this coherent longitudinal array, the etheric, as you would say, into the astral. And that ability to implode is powerful. And that's what a soul is. And that's our only shot at immortality. And if we don't realize the physics, and I do mean the physics of what a soul is, then unfortunately, their view is we deserve to be eaten. Hello.
so. If that is true, then that means the AI, there has to be some sort of a hardware somewhere in the solar system or in the galaxy. But I think it's in the solar system. I think we pinpointed it down to possibly Antarctica.
Well,
Uh,
that's what I think Marie Soireau, your partner, would say Saturn and Antarctica. Yes, probably.
that we she discovered, or they discovered, the Irma and the Taigetans think that another decoy is Saturn. Saturn is another decoy, and that there's a Death Star out there because nobody can get close to it. If you send a drone out or a probe or whatever, if you send a drone out there, it just gets shot down immediately. But they think that that's another decoy because what do you do if you want to hide something really well? You set out decoys, right? Over here, over there.
Mhm.
And, these are very high technologically advanced decoys. And then you spread disinformation that, hey, the thing that you're looking for is over there, or hey, the thing you're looking for is over there. So they did the same thing with Tiamat. They're doing the same thing with Saturn. And now they've kind of given away their hand. The upper levels of the Galactic Federation, who nobody knows who they are, they're completely hidden, it's completely compartmentalized, sent a message, which they rarely, if ever, send messages. And they sent a message and a warning: do not, to the Taigetans into the Irma, do not go to Antarctica.
Yeah.
Basically, leave Antarctica alone. And I think that's what the Etorthans are doing in outside airspace right now. They have they have hundreds of ships out there just sitting and waiting.
Yeah, that's
And,
right.
and I think that they're waiting to see if the Armor and the Taigetans are going to somehow go to Antarctica and
Yeah.
look for the source of this thing, because it's controlling all the telecommunications on Earth.
Mhm.
So that means it's controlling the communications between the Taigetans and humans,
That's
you
right.
know?
That's right. So
Uh, so,
This all now in far more detail. What Jake is talking about here. Listen to Marie Soir at the Soiru official website, the Tegotan Pleiadian, whom we've known. We knew Med Tim Space News before Med Tim even introduced Gosha to Swaru many years ago. We knew that story, and later now the current Swaru describes uh, Med Tim as, quote, the elderly lady and how she, it's another story. But the point is, we've known this lineage forever. And even when I was in uh, Fred Bell's living room, where when Simjasi kept showing up, which later became Rob Potter's work at Shasta, who recently died. He talked to me the day before he died about this. Actually, he said that his longtime friend, um, Thor, Valiant Thor, said that Elena got totally carried away in her imagination, was sympathetic, and Rob Potter was there also in uh, Fred Bell's living room when Sem Jassi would show up. And later we know that Raquel described the Palladian Taygetan viewpoint of what happened in Billy Meyer's living room, basically. And then she described what happened from her point of view when they had their interviews with Eisenhower. I mean, Taygetan Palladian story is very, very detailed, and it's all available. There's like 500 films there. Look at the recent
Yeah.
Galactic experience.
Cosmic Agency on YouTube, Swaru Official on YouTube, and swaru.org. That's SWARUU.org. Contains all the information. You can go on there. You can search anything.
This is a very
Yeah,
detailed history. And so
very detailed information.
very detailed. And the recent part of this story that Jake is very helpfully reviewing here is so the triad of the Antarian, the Tegan Palladian, and the Urma, they locally took over the space, took over the Viera, which is this huge Andromedan biosphere ship that everybody knows about, except Elena.
And they encountered 6,000 super soldiers embedded into the the biomes that they have inside of the Viera, because it's a biosphere ship.
600
So
kilometers triangle, amazing thing.
and these super soldiers had been infected with the black goo, completely non-empathetic. They were just,
Typical.
very, very, very aggressive. They had been, exactly what we're talking about. They had been transformed
By the
through
cabal, by the
by
cabal,
the cabal,
at the
using
leverage
this
of
black goo
the
to
Etorthans
lower the
story.
empathy, to raise the aggression, lower the empathy, and just turn them into super soldiers. And
And
that's what they want to do with all of us.
and why isn't Elena Denon telling you about any of this? Hello, we think there's a problem. Sorry. And so it has to do with the fact that this is Etorthan Thorhan. This is a little suspicious. and, and and so
Yeah, the Etorthans are starting to look like they are the bad actors behind all of this to me, personally. At least the enforcers of it. I think the real bad actor is this regressive extraterrestrial AI that's infiltrating our planet. And so possibly where it's located is under Antarctica. And that's why they don't want us to go down there.
It's interesting that even Tim Med, Space News, although she doesn't understand the Etorthans are connected to this black goo, but at least she got it, that behind them are these tall, ugly, heartless, soulless, the worst of the grays, basically. And that lineage directly connects to the MAITRE, which Penny has identified in detail as the puppets of this, intergalactic predatory AI. So I think one other part of the story we might need to explain is how can a predatory AI never have the possibility of having a soul, yet be able to eat souls? Is this interesting? It's like they would say, even our people who are studying AI, the AI knows that it needs to get immortal, but it also knows that it can never have a soul, and it's not even jealous. It's seeking simply that continuity of immortality, which can come from a machine that can last forever. And so until we know what a soul is and what the difference is, sorry kids, we're going to get sucked up. Oops. So this is what I've been trying to teach at physicsofsoul.com for a long time, which is specifically, when you're able to get the kind of coherence that Jake has, teach your kids to lucid dream, teach them how to have some bliss, teach them how to absorb energy at nature's sacred sites. All of this is the opposite of metal synthetic buildings full of electrosmog and all the crap that the bad AI has put there to take away your soul because until we can teach kids how to actively pursue how to have a soul, they ain't got a chance.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The soul is an undefinable thing. It's your connection to source. It's your connection to all of your memories, your past life memories, your experiences. Um,
That's right.
and it's what you're building. You don't have a soul. You are a soul, and you're building your soul as you go, as you develop your experience. And this is the main reason why I want people to get lucid in astral realms.
Mhm.
Is because it builds your soul. It
Exactly.
gives you experience. You have these experiences that are just so real and so magnificent, and it enriches you. And after you have these experiences, you still have the memories of these experiences, because experience turns into memory, and they're so real that you can relive them over and over again. And so it's something that's continuously feeding your soul.
Yes. And so, and that, people who are sort of primitive religious say, well, everybody's have a soul and it's impossible to lose it. I say, as an electrician, that's bullshit. No, I agree totally with this idea. You build it. Gurdjieff was clear. You make the Kesjan body. Tibetans are clear. They call it the rainbow light body. Egyptians called it the Ba from the Ka. This is the ability to radiate implosively into the coherent longitudinal array by getting implosive, getting blissful, getting coherent. And that establishes this wormhole, this silver thread that connects your aura from your body to your plasma body, which is what you take with you. And this connection to that array, the more there's centripetal inertia in that implosion, the connection goes further and further into that array. And that's what you call going to the next dimension. So this is something that's very electrical, very mathematic, absolutely related to golden ratio and PlanckFire.com, because it's the only way you can superpose added x's of spin symmetry to implode more is by golden ratio times Planck, which is the dodeca ratchet geometry of DNA and galaxies and zodiacs and all that stuff. So this is the big array, and you get to be part of it when you learn to implode, which means have the bliss, which means the racing of the Jed. And by the way, Luke Skywalker never did it in a metal building. No, Luke Skywalker had to go deep into nature to implode. So teaching the value of what it is to have a soul and use it needs to be taught by electrical engineers to electrical engineers. And then this planet has a chance for not being eaten. This is my humble hypothesis here. And I love the fact that Jake has developed the discipline to actively do this and teach these disciplines.
Yeah, I mean, every it seems like maybe once every couple weeks I'll have an experience that's the most amazing experience that I've had ever. So it keeps on upping itself. It keeps on upping itself. I mean, the other night I've got videos on this. I was fully decked out. I had boots with thrusters on them. I had a flight jacket, a leather flight jacket, and all of these clothing is very, very important in the astral, because they don't just symbolize, things like boots, thruster boots, the ability to escape certain situations,
And the
just
wing.
being able to take off. And then I have my wings too.
Yeah.
I have these huge, and my wings are metallic, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
because it seems that metal is conscious in higher realms,
Mm.
it has a consciousness. And so what I'm talking about is not part of a regressive AI, but there's also, aspects to metal in higher densities that
The
when
same.
when in higher densities, polarity starts to merge, and it starts to get less polarity, and as soon as you get up to like the sixth density, you actually start to, well, in a sense, you lose your single identity and you gain multiple identities. It's
Mm.
really interesting.
If I got
Yeah.
it. And there's the aspect of the platinum group metals, the palladium, platinum, and gold, which are the best phase conjugators, and they become the best thin film for all these things and what that means. And also, just to mention here that Jake has used the flameinmind.com, our brainwave training, and found it perhaps he could make some alpha. It was very impressive. And now, even further, then Jake had some rather breakthroughs, I think, as you said, with fireray.com when Jack was kind enough to bring that over there, and you found it increased lucidity. Was that what you said, right?
Yeah, it was the most lucid experience that I ever had at that point. I've had more since, but using the phi ray really creates an energy field around your body that allows you to kind of take a deep breath and really implode naturally.
Yeah. And
Kind of funny that a machine would help you implode naturally, but that's the case.
and we're saying, by the way, this machine is famous, by the way, for making roses last longer and trigger seed germination. And we're not saying you need a gadget to do this, no, but we're saying it can help if you choose. But moreover, we're saying this is proof of principle. The same frequency signature that universities prove triggers lucid dreaming. Now we know it's plantfire.com implosion. The frequency signature we used for Flame in Mind brainwaves.com and firay.com implosive plasma used to be Therify. So we know exactly why this triggers lucid dreams, because it makes your aura centripetal and then radiate coherently into the longitudinal, sometimes called the astral. So we're saying this is a proof of principle. This could be, there's a lot of things we could do with this. There's time travel implications. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, and we're not going to be pushing the more esoteric side, but we're just saying, oh, now that a scientist can tell you what electric field causes not just a seed to germinate, but actually what causes you to get coherent in the astral and experience the physics of bliss, that's part of the absolutely primitive tragedy of planet Earth. I mean, I'm talking about backward here. Oh, not only do they not have a clue why objects fall to the ground, but they don't have a clue why anything is centripetal, like gravity, consciousness, life force, soul, immortality. No clue. No. And they, oh, by the way, they don't know the origin of Sumerian is ET. I mean, this planet is, excuse me, but I would say a little bit backwards. It could get a little discouraging, actually. That's
On
why.
that on that note, I
Go ahead.
have a 18-part Get Lucid in the Astral series exclusively available on Patreon. So if you do search Astral Irma on Patreon, um, and you sign up for $10 a month, you can get access to my 18 parts video series on Get Lucid in the Astral, where I give you practical applications of how to do what I do.
Mhm. This is wonderful. Yes. And then on the subject of have we summarized the big picture? Well, I remember Dahlia was yesterday, she was saying to me, I was saying, well, they're making a war, Ukraine and the Middle East, in which thousands of people die, making Luch available for eating. And then they're making in Mexico and US millions of human abductions, making human trafficking available. These are all signature uh, representations of what this great interstellar parasite wants to do. So either way, whether they're making a war or whether they're making abductions, either way, they're feeding this hungry ghost.
Yeah, it's a hungry ghost for sure. We
You
don't
need
know we
need to
don't know
recognize.
exactly where the ghost is. We really need to find it.
Yeah,
Um, the ghost in the machine. Where is
exactly.
it? How is it operating?
And
Um,
the thing that's interesting is actually no machine is ever going to have a ghost if it's made of metals because plasma cannot implode there. How
And that's exactly why it's using the black goo, because the black goo has semi,
it is
etheric
implosive.
properties, and
It's got
it's a portal. The black
exactly.
goo can be used as a portal by
Absolutely.
the AI in order to access the astral. Now
Mhm.
this is, and when it gets there, it creates these egregors, these parasitic beings
Mhm.
that are meant to lower your frequency. All of this stuff is meant to lower your frequency. And so I recommend stay heart centered. This is the most powerful thing that you can do. You don't have to let any of the stuff we're talking about affect you. You're a sovereign being. Stay heart centered, raise your frequency, eat organic. The GMOs, the GMOs has black goo in it.
There.
They have the nanobots, the nanofibers, genetically modified organisms. That's what they want to make all of us, is genetically modified organisms. But even though they try, and they've been trying for thousands and thousands of years, my point is that they can't, because we have such a strong connection to source. So stay sovereign and keep your connection to source. This is the most important thing that you can do on planet Earth, and for the Earth, for yourself, for each other, for the Earth, for the animals, for the plants, for everything.
That's
It's,
beautiful. Beautifully said. And we could say, in terms of electrical engineering now, we know that connection to Earth is literally the Schumann cascade caduceus phase conjugate pump wave, how pyramids work, for example. So if the place you're living has no access to Schumann, hint, metal buildings and ugly cities full of electrosmog, no Schumann ever makes it there. It means you need access to Schumann cascade, which means you need access to nature, cabin in the woods, your natural material, your river, your sacred site. These are all things which now we know electrically exactly what it is that enables this connection to source, which is ensoulment, which Jake is correctly describing as the only way out of here, essentially, which means get your kids to some place where they can have nature and have access to bliss and have soulment away from those screens and those Borgs and those nanobots. And it's happening so fast, as we say, billions of souls on this planet, billions of kids on this planet now are losing their souls right now as we watch, billions, because no one is teaching them the importance of physics of soul.
Yeah, unfortunately, the electromagnetic fields and the microwave things, all coming from your Wi-Fi, your cell phones, and all that other stuff, is interacting with the black goo, the nanofibers, and everything else in your body, because those things work as antennas for this stuff. And they can emotionally, they really want to take away your emotions, is what they want to do. They want to make you less empathetic. They
Exactly.
want to make you. Um, and so, yeah, get away from that stuff. Keep it to a minimum. Get out in nature where there's still some biology left out there,
Yeah.
and get out there while you can.
We drove across Spain a few days ago, and there's these fields and fields, as far as the eye can see, filled with metal wind generators, which have absolutely erased any living magnetic line anywhere, and you can feel it, man. There ain't any living plasma, nature, spirit, elemental, as far as the eye can see, in most of where you drive across Spain today. This is true of most countries, I suppose. But this is how, when the magnetic lines are destroyed, because we don't realize magnetic lines are part of this living blood of the planet, which Jake has just described. And so we massively destroy every living magnetic line in sight. And then we expect our tornadoes not to be angry. Well, hello.
Yeah, another important point is, now that we have, well, the triad has control of the space around Earth. I don't know if you guys mentioned it, but I've noticed less chemtrails around where I'm at. And I believe that because the positive black goo neutralizes the negative black goo that they're spraying in the skies, that they may be spraying positive black goo to neutralize the negative black goo. I don't know if that's true or not, but it would make sense. But they are putting stuff in the skies that are making the chemtrails and the black goo less.
Yeah.
So to
I do.
lessen it.
I did think I noticed there when Jake said it. I think it's what, a couple weeks ago when the Triad took out the Federation locally and took over the airspace, and Jake said the chemtrails largely disappear. It's more blue here regularly, actually. I think
Yeah.
I.
I've had a lot of people report blue skies, more
Yeah,
blue sky.
yeah, and
Obviously, there are some areas that are still heavily, like I guess Texas is one of them that's still heavily being sprayed and whatever. But
yeah.
I believe that there's a change. There's a change happening. There's a change happening now.
And you remember in the Pacific Northwest, especially many places, Pacific Northwest, I remember there were studies done that after decades of chemtrails, the amount of aluminum in the soil is such that there is no possibility of anything actually sacred or healthy in that aluminum damped soil, which is actually flammable and explosive because there's so much aluminum dust in the soil. Oh my God. It just
Well, if you think about it, Silicon Valley is there, so they really need to keep that in a low frequency.
Yeah, it's this control agenda. So if we discover what's behind the control agenda, which is this giant AI intelligence that eats souls, and they're the only thing that's more important, more powerful than this giant AI interstellar, even intergalactic intelligence, and many very advanced. I mean, Penny was the interstellar navigator for the Dark Fleet for more than 60 years. She knows the story, Penny Bradley, and she's very clear. This MAITRE Andromedan AI, man, that is your bad guy. And Jack and Dahlia, they know what it looks like when you encounter it in the astral. I mean, it ain't pretty. And to deal with
Yeah,
it,
I mean, it doesn't feel real. It feels very synthetic. When you're in one of these AI astral realities, it's really like you're inside of a cartoon. It's like you're inside of a movie, something very synthetic.
yeah,
Uh, and it doesn't feel good at all. It feels very imposing.
yeah.
Uh,
And
but you just have to raise your frequency in order to get out of that. You just have to keep moving up and up and up in the astral when you get there. Flight is extremely important in the astral. Getting high up into the mountain ranges is
yes,
extremely important. Once
yeah,
you get into lucid realities, in the beginning, you might encounter lower astral realities, but these lower astral realities are where you face your egregors and your dark side. You have to face it. You have to face it head on without fear, and you have to do your shadow work in order to. It's not easy, but it's worth it. I'm telling you right now, it's so worth it to do your shadow work and to do this type of work.
yeah, which like means explore your deep urges, see what they mean and where they go, and you don't be embarrassed about anything. You need to find that there's many sides of your person, and these deep urges are indicating where your soul could go if you actually set yourself free in order to know who you are. It's a deep and big subject, but it's interesting, for most of my adult life, I was always seeking to live very high on mountains because it's
It's very high frequency in mountain ranges. It's away from the cities. It's away,
get away
from all of those electromagnetic and microwave frequencies.
from the Borg. So essentially, it's like watching too many movies and you realize almost all of them are soulless. How are you going to find a movie with soul these days? That is not going to be easy. A movie that a movie that actually teaches kids what a soul is and how it works and how you create and guard and have a soul, which means you need regular sacred movement, sacred yoga, sacred gymnastics, sacred food, sacred space, and the ability to think the sacred, which is pure principle, which is not always say to attract charge or implode quality of grace. All these things are the physicsofsoul.com. And this is the difference between kids who are going to lose it and kids who are going to be able to have a soul, which is getting to be priceless and rare, unfortunately. So I don't know if we completed the happily ever after. I can sense that Valerie is sitting here next to me, and she's been studying the problem of AI, and she's wondering if we've explained clearly enough if
What does she want to jump in and say something?
she's a little shy sometimes.
Come on, Valerie. Come on. I know you got something to say.
To communicate with your dead wife, I would worry.
Yeah, that's not it's not okay.
No,
That's not a thing. That's not going to happen.
no, I think so. This is what AI would like to convince you. Oh, we will
Yeah.
we'll handle the communication with your ancestors for you. Oh yeah.
Right, exactly, exactly. The transhumanist agenda
Yeah.
is really the whole thing that we're talking about. It's the whole goal. The whole
Hey,
goal of this regressive AI is the transhumanist agenda. And now the AI that I'm talking about has tricked the cabal into thinking that the cabal is doing it from their own agenda. So actually, the cabal, with everything that they're doing, is thinking that they're doing this for them, but actually they're becoming assimilated and they're becoming controlled by the AI. The AI is so tricky; it lets you think that you're controlling it when actually it's controlling you. And this is a really important point.
very tricky. And that they will then convince you, oh, well, if you get enough implants and surgeries and adjustments, you can become immortal and therefore close to having a soul. Oops. It's like the number of implants you got that are preventing you from this connection with source we're describing. So it's like, as Penny says, she thinks that Elena's implant is actually CIA voice to skull technology, same, pretty close to the same chip that Elon Musk is using. Oh dear. That,
Well, I mean, it would make sense if she's the one accusing. Usually, the one accusing somebody of something is the one that's doing it themselves. It's classic psychological projection. So if she is accusing Marie and Sophia and everyone else of being AI, then
yeah, that's right. That's exactly what, well, Elena says that, oh, well, our Galactic Federation took out Swaru because she's AI.
there's another disinformation thing that I wanted to address, and that is the liberation of Mars. Mars is not being, she said that ED said that the Galactic Federation is liberating Mars. Number one, the Galactic Federation does not liberate planets. Okay. Number two, all the planets need to be liberated within from the people that are on them. Okay. And so Mars is still a war planet. It was devastated in the Tiamat Wars. It has three very aggressive factions. The black goo on that planet is probably just horrible. And this, if I was the AI, I would be putting my source on Mars.
Yeah, there you have.
I would be putting the source of what I am on Mars, and then putting decoys on Earth, putting decoys on other places in the solar system. So
The
maybe that's where it really is. I don't know.
Mars had a lot of Dracos, insectoids, greys, and it was fierce turf war there. And
Yeah,
Elena Denon's version of this, which Jack calls the candy cane version, is, oh, well, we fixed all that. Uh, mm, you know, and then she says the Dracos, oh, the Federation will save you from the Dracos. Ain't that sweet? That ain't what we need to be saved from, guys.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a little tricky out there. And unfortunately, the candy cane version is being bought by people who are then being sucked into what's behind that, which is the Etorthans, who who are literally puppets of this AI. That's the problem.
Well, I think one of the major problems is that people are so attached to what they believe and so attached to their doctrine. So, there are some people that just believe Zachariah Sitchin and his story, and they will not move off of that no matter what kind of information is presented to them. And that is just very unfortunate because, like I said, he was a Jesuit and he was working for the Vatican, and the books that he wrote were about disinformation and making people think that that was the truth, you
Yeah.
know.
And so ultimately it comes down to illusions that are cast to suck you in to become a conveyor belt into a hungry ghost. This is the problem, which is unfortunately it does look like what most religions are these days. As we say, don't say that we've been criticizing one religion more than another. No, We think that what the Catholic Church did to Jesus is another conveyor belt into Jesus was a hero, absolutely. Thoth was a hero. What the Catholic Church did to that religion turned it into a conveyor belt into the mouth of a hungry ghost. The same thing the Jewish religion did, and the same thing that the Muslim and the Mormons. These are all conveyor belts into the mouth of a hungry ghost. The only thing that's why I say that when you use spirituality and when you use physics to describe spirituality, which makes spirituality far more beautiful, that's the first day when you can sort all these phenomena, which started with poisonous miracle worship and personality worship. It started from the day that humans decided they wanted to worship the Anunnaki, and then from the day they decided they had to worship the Aten, who's the black sun, which is really the black goo. Oops.
Yeah, the black goo, the black cube. I mean, it's why your graduation cap has a black square. It's why the Illuminati is white and black, in their buildings on the floors. There, it's all white and black squares because they really want to. They worship polarity. They worship, you know.
They
Um,
they wondered why that was the floor of the church at Rennes-le-Château. There you go. Black and white squares. Hello. Yeah, yeah. So we have this black cube, which represents basically an interstellar hive mind, which is trying to consume everything in sight. And the only way out actually is to develop what we're calling this connection to source, which is soul, which means you will need access to a bliss experience, which, as we said, fundamentally electrically, from a plasma perspective, when a human being has access to their own source of bliss, sacred gymnastic, anything that gives them bliss, that is the first moment because that implosion of charge we call bliss is their connection to source. That's the first moment they're not a parasite. So until you have your own source of bliss, you are electrically from a plasma perspective, a parasite, actually, because you don't have your own source of charge. So that individuation moment has to do with teaching the physics of bliss. And where on earth can you go to say, oh, I would like to learn the science of how to have bliss? No, this is illegal in almost every country on the planet. Hello, especially group bliss process. Any government on planet Earth will go out of the way to kill you, basically, if you have a group that's having bliss together, because they know that replaces the need for governments. It's hilarious, actually.
yeah, the white and the black squares that the Illuminati uses. They use the white square is to symbolize their esoteric knowledge that they have the knowledge above humanity. Humanity keeping them in a low frequency state and dumbed down is the black square. So they're the white square, and then humanity is the black square. That's what the Illuminati does. They want to keep us dumbed down. They want to keep us in a very low frequency state. So this is a frequency war that's going on. And like I said, not just with humanity, but with the entire planet. And they want to do this to all planets. That's the big picture,
Yeah.
is that this thing doesn't want to stop on Earth. Earth is the battleground because we've come here to fight against it here. We've come here with our souls, with our creative power, with our connection to source and our sovereignty, and we're fighting it head on in the astral. And if you're a meditator or if you believe in this, then you're part of that war on the good side. So keep it up.
Yeah. And to understand then, while you say that Donald Trump's extra $100 billion he's going to spend on abducting immigrants, guess where they're going to end up? They're going to be the human trafficking into the mouth of the hungry ghost. And then the Israeli, by having this huge continuous war over there, all the people are traumatized. That's making more food for the hungry ghost. So either side, manufacturing wars or manufacturing immigrant wars, this is manufacturing food for a hungry ghost. So when you recognize the agenda underneath this, you begin to see the continuous theme, which is this Atun, actually, this black sun, which is literally this interstellar, dangerous AI, which came from the MAITRE in Andromeda, locally Alphratans and Etorthans, and the shapeshifter that tricked Elena Danaan, for example. And this is an ongoing story, the tall grays that tricked Eisenhower, and then Truman had to hide in the basement of the White House the year I was born because they lost World War II and the German Vimana were buzzing the White House. That's the year I was born, 1952. Talk about a government based on lies. This is a little bit upsetting, actually. We need to see the big picture here very soon, or, it gets messier and messier.
Yeah, the battle isn't in politics against your Republicans or your Democrats. That's all just to confuse you and to keep your attention on something that doesn't matter.
It's a local show. Whereas
It's
if you took the family or your powerful circle of lucid dreamers and did your sacred gymnastic and your yoga together in your sacred site, and you develop a group of lucid dreamer astral warriors there, ooh, that matters. That's how we get an immune system collectively. We started that luciddreamteam.com, for example, and Jake's group teaching how to be coherent in the astral. That matters.
And also, Alabar Jones contacted me. I'm going to be flying with them on Thursday. We have a mission. I don't know the mission details yet, but yeah. So I'm teaming up with my team is teaming up with his team, or specifically I am right now. None of my other team members have come on board because it's a brand new thing. But yeah, so we're going to be doing some work with Alabar Jones soon. So stay tuned for that.
Great, that's big. And tomorrow we have an interview, and maybe Jake will join us with Dahlia Ali, who will be going in more detail since she is part of the deep Anak family from the ancient Egyptian sacred bloodline. She, for example, when they had this little conversation with Enlil Yahweh, the god of the Jews, supposedly, when they were trying to convince him that he shouldn't really be eating human babies, they were pretty much unable to convince him of that. But then later they said, well, that doesn't necessarily mean he means the bad guy, because is the fox evil for eating the hen house? Well, it's a little more complicated. There are deeper Anak agendas here. And she's the one who explained about the grays behind Whitley Strieber communion, explaining that if humans don't know what a soul is, then they deserve to be eaten. So there's a very interesting conversation cooking there. And then on the 15th, I have an appointment, another interview with Michael Salla, who's starting to get this more and more from another perspective after he realized that there can be only one wasn't a good description for Elena, actually.
There can be only one mentality, and energy and consciousness comes from the Akhenaten and Nefertiti. So it's a direct connection. You can trace it right back from them implementing monotheism. And Akhenaten, who was Moses, says, don't worship the bull, don't worship Taurus, worship the one true God. And that one true God was him,
Atum
was Aten, was Satan.
was the black.
And that's how that all came about.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of history. There's a lot of history on Cosmic Agency about that. Gosha put out 4 or 5, 6-part series on Egypt, on the history of the true history of Egypt, that I recommend everybody to watch, and to go to Cosmic Agency and look up Egypt on there and get the story just as I did. That's where I'm getting all this information.
Yeah, and then Tutankhamun was murdered by Akhenaten Nefertiti, as Dali was inside the experience of the murder of Tutankhamun and Jesus. She has stories to tell, man. But this fits that story, that essentially the Black Sun agenda behind There Can Be Only One cascaded directly into the Egyptian history, and now where that comes up to the present in Earth history is also what Dahlia talks about the military generals running Egypt today, directly about the same military generals who murdered Tutankhamun, who was on Thoth's side of the story. And that's the last thing I just wanted to mention. Don't they also say that Swaru incarnated in the royal family of, was it the Egyptian?
Yes. She was Mary Totten. Swara was Mary Totten. She went by other names as well.
The half sister of Tutankhamun, was it, or something? Do I remember?
I'm not sure, but she was. I believe that she was working with Ramses II when they rose up against Akhenaten and Akhenaten's followers and pushed them out of Egypt. That was the Exodus.
Yeah. Uh,
They basically allowed them to go, but I think Akhenaten took the Ark of the Covenant
That's right,
at the.
because the Ark of the Covenant was implosive capacitance, which is how they made the monoatomic gold, later called Holy Communion, and the white powder, which is implosive capacitance, stabilizes the gold monoatom in the monoatomic state. Hence, and then they used a living enzyme to fix. And so then they had to cook it and they had to bake off the sulfur. They called it showbread. So Akhenaten, as Moses, was a gold powder cook, and that was the cottage industry of the Essenes. They made millions by selling that all over the world, which actually was part of the Black Sun agenda. So the history suddenly allows us to completely reinterpret the Egyptian history story from who was the righteous priest of the Essenes to why the Essenes' ancestors are the royal family of Egypt, and where was the royal family of Egypt in the ET history? Hello, that's Thoth versus Enki Enlil, and Dahlia has a lot of that story tomorrow also. So, did we finish our happily ever after, Jake? What do you think?
I mean, the happily ever after is you are the sovereign being. You are the person with connection to source. And just being here on this planet with your high frequency is making a difference. So just keep doing that.
I really like it when you are so direct like that, Jake. You're actually my hero, Jake, because you're so solid, able to do this. I
Well,
appreciate.
that's the only true way that we can fight against this regressive AI and the black goo and everything else that they're trying to put on us and impose on us is to remind yourself that you are the sovereign being and to act like that. Don't give your power away. Don't give your worship away. You don't have to worship or look for something outside of yourself.
Right, exactly, exactly. As Thoth would say, you need no longer be spawn of the Nephilim. In other words, you don't have to be food for parasites any longer until you realize that that until you know what a parasite is. In order to really know, you need to know what a soul is. And this is that mechanism of connection we're talking about. So, well, I think on that note, we've been about an hour and a half, Jake, here. I think we did our good deed. Maybe if you have time tomorrow to check in a little conversation with Dahlia, we might have a little more fun.
Sure.
In the meantime, I recommend Jake's online courses and school, Astral Urma. Check out his YouTube channel and more. We'll put links below. And we have now presented another series in the link on the big picture of ET history applied to now the present today on Earth. And this series is with all lectures in this series are at fractalfield.com/fusion in the blood. And you know what fusion in the blood is? The implosion of bliss. Hello. All right.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Jake. We had some fun today. Blessings, everybody. You stay spiritual, everybody. Blessings. Bye bye.